Hello students, welcome to week 5 for COM 403 Communication Theory. This week we are exploring theories under the area of group communication. This week you'll see that we are reading chapters 17, 19, and 21. We're watching 2 videos related to the theories we're covering, as well as completing discussion board number 5, reaction paper number 2, and our critical assignment topic rationale. Discussion board number 5 asks you to spend some time looking at functional perspective of group decision making. There are 4 questions that you will answer that are related to this and providing a full and complete thorough discussion with your classmates. Remember that you need to thoroughly analyze and reflect upon the questions as well as construct a thoughtful answer that includes references to the course text and at least one outside source. Reaction paper number 2 is in a very similar format to the first reaction paper that we did, where you will be writing 4 to 5 pages where you react to a prompt related to communication theory, explaining, applying, and critiquing the theory covered within the prompt, as well as presenting their reaction in a cohesive, well-written APA-style formatted paper. This week you will provide a reflection and a reaction to social judgment theory. If you want more information on social judgment theory, review the week 4 lecture. That's the section of theories where we covered social judgment theory and spent some time with it. Now we're going to pull out what we learned last week and write a paper for it. So with that, you'll obviously clearly explain and define the theory as well as its use as a theory of influence, and then go through the 5 different things that the prompt asks you to go through when you write your reaction to this paper. What I'm looking for in terms of a reaction is I'm looking for a critical response to this theory that clearly articulates your thought and analyzes it according to the questions posed within the prompt. So to accurately do that, you'll need to make sure you include some outside sources as well as the course text. The critical assignment rationale. So to help you understand what this is for your critical assignment, which is due in week 7, you'll be making a map of the field of communication theory. This visual map is really designed for you to organize your own personal theory, your own personal thoughts as to how you would map out the field into the 7 traditions of theories, as well as the most pertinent communication theories. So what you're doing in a sense is you're making a visual map either through something like Prezi or Screencast or VoiceThread, and you will, actually the 2 formats are Prezi and VoiceThread, and you will include the 7 traditions of communication theory as well as at least 3 theories for each of those traditions, and map them out as to the ones you feel are most pertinent for that tradition. So it's your own personal reflection on communication theory, showing me that you understand each tradition and which theories you feel are the most relevant for you to know about communication. You'll also write a 3 to 4 page paper that explains the map and why justifications for your tradition and theories with at least 5 outside sources. What you're doing this week, though, is a rationale for this project. So we're beginning the project. You will provide a 300-word rationale, which is justification describing how you plan to organize your map of the field of communication theory, as well as describe which traditions you feel are the most important, and plan on how you plan to address each part of the final assignment. Now, to review, it's important to know that we should go back to the beginning of our course text and look at chapters 4 specifically, chapter 4, and also chapters 2 and 3. But chapter 4 gives you an idea of how we map the territory using the 7 traditions. We went through this in the first couple weeks of the course. So what you'll be doing now is looking at those traditions, looking at the theories we've been going through, and creating your own visual map of the field as well as a reflection paper about that to turn in week 7. This week I want to see 300 words looking at how you are planning to describe to organize it. So you'll say things like, for example, I'm going to organize it with the sociocultural tradition as the first tradition because I feel it's the most important because of this. I would include theories like this in this tradition, so on and so forth. So if you have any questions, let me know. This week is more of our organization point forward, our brainstorming guide to help us fully understand how it fits within the final project. So I wanted to spend some time looking at and talking about functional group perspective on decision making. This theory was developed by Randy Huaracha and Dennis Goran. And what they found is that it is a socio-psychological theory rooted in the cybernetic tradition. It is very objective, or it's closer to objective than it is interpretive. When you look at your chapter, you'll see that it's not fully objective, but not fully interpretive. And it provides a prescriptive approach that describes and predicts task group performance when 4 communication functions are fulfilled. Specifically, it considers what communication must accomplish for jointly made decisions to be wise. Goran laid the groundwork for this theory in his earlier writings on group decision-making, and Hiroaka developed the core principles of this theory during his graduate studies, and for 20 years of his research tested and refined the theories. On chance we would be intrigued by a behind-the-scenes look, and we have a video that Randy really spent some time explaining that. He tells us that it's important to know that looking at the requirements if members are to reach high quality solutions, they refer to requisite functions of effective decision making. These are requirements for positive group outcomes, the problem analysis, goal setting, and things of that nature. They refer to these as functional perspectives labels. These 4 functions are listed here in the slide, and they clearly tell us what each of them mean. As we look at each of the 4 functions of effective decision making, we'll see that the first one is the analysis of the problem. When you look at the analysis of the problem, we're considering and determining the nature, the extent, and the cause of the problem facing the group. So something may be going on that requires improvement and change within an organization or within a group, and to answer this, the group members must take a realistic look at the current parameters of where they're at. The second one is goal setting. This is where you establish criteria by which to judge proposed solutions. Because group members need to be clear on what they are trying to accomplish in regards to discussions of goals and objectives as a second requisite of decision making, a group needs to establish criteria by which to judge proposed solutions. To do this, criteria must set forth in a minimal qualities that are acceptable to the group as a solution to possess. If the group fails to satisfy this task requirement, it's likely that the decision will be driven by power or passion rather than reason. The third thing a group will do in coming to an effective decision-making process is identification of alternatives. This is where there's generation of options that sufficiently solve the problem in a multitude of ways. The importance of marshaling a number of alternative solutions for which the group can choose from helps generate the need to generate many alternatives as realistically possible. Then relatively few may be introduced, and the corresponding possibility of finding the acceptable answer will be low. So that as you evaluate the situation by providing all of the alternatives, you can make a sound decision. The fourth thing in this theory that you consider is evaluation of positive and negative characteristics. This is where you test the relative merits of each option proposed in the third one, the identification of alternatives, against the criteria selected. You essentially are weighing the benefits of the cost of each decision, and you choose the one that benefits the group the most. After a group has identified all alternative solutions, participants must take care to test the relative merits of each option against the criteria they believe are important. This point-by-point comparison doesn't take place automatically. There must be a decision-making process involved in this to help them determine which one is the best and most effective for the group. As time goes on, the group will be able to make a decision based off of those ideas. It's important to know that prioritizing is a huge component of this theory. The word prioritizing within the theory refers to addressing the 4 requisite functions in a logical perception. There is no one sequence or group agenda that does it better. The group has to come up with a way to utilize these 4 functions in a way that is cohesive and beneficial to the entire group. As you look through this, the role of communication believes that the discussion among members have a significant effect on the quality of group decisions. The interpersonal connections that happen through this process provide traditional wisdom that suggests that talk is the medium channel or conduit in which information travels between participants. Verbal interaction makes it possible for 1, to distribute and pool information, 2, catch and remedy errors, and then 3, influence each other. But distractions are non-productive and create channel noise, causing a loss of information. So it's very important that you see this as it pans out. What you'll find is that there's a very huge interpersonal connection to this theory and looking at how groups make decisions equitably within any type of group setting. So this is the theory we're looking at today. Your discussion board is related to it. The next one I wanted to point out was cultural approach to organizations. So Clifford Geertz is very much more of a cultural guru, cultural hermeneutics, looks at a lot of things to do with culture and sociology and communication. This theory right here is developed by Geertz and Panofsky, and they look particularly at this from a sociocultural, semiotic, more of a symbolic perspective, looking at the interpretive nature of this type of communication. So they view culture as a metaphor of organizational life. The use of culture as a root of a metaphor was undoubtedly stimulated by Western fascination with the economic success of Japanese corporations in the 1970s and 80s. Back then, American business leaders traveled to the Far East to study the methods of productions. They discovered that superior quantity and quality of Japan's industrial output had less to do with technology than with workers' shared cultural value of loyalty to each other and the corporation they work for. As such, organizations began to look radically different depending on how people in the host cultural structure, meaning communal, face-saving communication and things of that nature played a role in this. Today, the term of corporate culture means different things to different people. Some that look at the phrase describe the surrounding environment that constrains a company's freedom to action. Others look at the term to refer to a quality of property of the organization. Sometimes we speak of culture as synonymous with image, character, or climate. However, Geertz's symbolic approach to culture and thus considers culture as more than a single variable to an organizational research. Organizational culture is not just another piece of the puzzle. It is the puzzle. For our point of view, culture is something an organization has, something an organization is. Culture is essentially a web of significance, a system of shared meanings. Culture is not whole or undivided. Geertz points out that the concept of culture as a system of shared meanings is sometimes vague and difficult to grasp. Through popular usage of equates culture with concerts and art museums, he refuses to use the word to signify less primitive ideas. Culture is not whole or undivided. Again, Geertz points out that even in close-knit societies, they have subcultures and countercultures within their boundaries. For example, employees in the sales and accounting departments of the same company may eye each other warily, and the first group calling accountants number crunchers and bean counters, and the accountants in turn labeling the sales team as fast talkers and glad handlers. Despite their differences, both groups may regard the blue-collar bowling night of the production workers as a strange ritual compared within their own weekend ritual of a round of golf. The whole point, though, is that we're looking at cultural performances are evaluated and driven within organizations. Cultural performance looks at actions by which members constitute and reveal their culture to themselves and others, an ensemble of texts. Geertz calls these cultural performances an ensemble of texts which the anthropologist strains to read over the shoulder of those who properly belong. This elusive nature of culture prompted Geertz to label it a soft science. It's not an experimental science. It's interpretive. It's an interpretation of one's search of meaning. So as we look at this, we have to look for thick descriptions within our organizations, a record of intertwined layers of common meaning that underlie what particular people do. To do this, we look at metaphors. We clarify what is unknown or confusing by equating it with the image of something that's more familiar and vivid. Geertz popularized the concept of thick description, particularly looking at it from an organizational perspective, in 4 things. You need to accurately describe talk and actions in the context in which they occur, capture the thoughts, emotions, and web of social interactions, assign motivation, intention, or purpose to what people say and do. 4, artfully write this up so readers feel they have experienced the events themselves. 5, interpret what happened, explain what it means within the culture. Thick description is tracing many strands of a cultural web and tracking it and evolving its meaning. No matter how high the stack of ethnographers' notes, without interpretation, they would still be a thin description. To do this, we look at the symbolic interpretation of stories within organizations. Geertz found that looking at organizations from a story perspective found that there are 3 types of stories within all organizations. Stories that are told over and over again provide a convenient window through which to view corporate webs of significance. There are 3 types of narrative that dramatize organizational life. Corporate stories carry the ideology of management and reinforce company policies. Every McDonald's franchisee hears about the late Ray Kroc, who, when he was chairman of the board, picked up trash in the parking lot when he'd visit a store. That's a corporate story in relation to ideology of management and reinforcing company policy. Personal stories are those that employees tell about themselves, often defining how they would like to be seen within the organization. If you've seen reruns of the NBC's The Office, you've witnessed Dwight Schrute's interviews with the camera crew. During these interviews, he talks about his excellence as an employee and how he deserves the respect of others at Dunder Mifflin Paper Company. These are his personal accounts that drive what he wants the organization to view him as. The 3rd type of story are collegial stories. These are positive or negative anecdotes told about others in the organization. So these are when you are describing how things really work. So you may be looking at other people's perspectives of what they view a person at that company as opposed to what their personal story is of that. And so when you look at it, you can see that there's rituals within this. The ritual of telling this and experiencing this communication is not looking at how the communication is transposed, but rather looking at what comes out of receiving this communication. So as we look at this and we gain perspective on it, it's important to realize how it relates to the course text and the information that we're looking at this term. Remember, we're reading chapter 17, 19, and 21. We're watching 2 videos this week, as well as completing discussion board number 5. And reaction paper number 2 and the critical assignment topic rationale. I pray you all have a blessed week, and if you have any questions, let me know. I look forward to interacting with you. God bless.